Operation Weserübung, the conquest of Northern Europe that changed the course of World War II. 1. The intoxication of victory after Poland, when the fear of war faded. In September 1939, the lightning-fast victory of the German army over Poland shocked all of Europe. In just a few weeks, a large nation collapsed under the power of the blitzkrieg tactic, lightning war. For the Nazi leadership, this was not merely a military victory, but a tremendous psychological boost. Adolf Hitler, who had previously still feared a total war with Britain and France, now began to believe that my military intuition is correct, and fate is standing on Germany's side. The German armed forces were also overflowing with confidence. The perfect coordination between tanks, mechanized infantry, and air power proved that modern warfare had entered a new era, one in which speed and surprise determined victory. But amid that exhilaration, all of Germany understood one thing: Poland was only the beginning. 2. The Phoney War, the deadly hesitation of Britain and France. After Poland collapsed, Britain and France, despite having declared war on Germany, fell into a state of paralysis. There was no major offensive. No real front was opened. The British press called it the Phoney War. The French called it la drôle de guerre, the strange war. The Germans mockingly referred to it as a sit-down war. The reasons for this hesitation were clear. The British and French economies had not yet been fully mobilized. The population was still haunted by the catastrophe of World War I. The armies retained a defensive mindset and lacked mechanization. And most importantly, they did not yet understand how dangerous blitzkrieg truly was. That silence was not peace. It was the calm before the storm. Number 3. Northern Europe. A potential battlefield underestimated. As early as the beginning of 1939, the British Admiralty had identified a fatal weakness of Germany. The German war industry was heavily dependent on Swedish iron ore. 90% of this ore was transported through the port of Narvik in northern Norway, a port that did not freeze in winter. If the Norwegian coast could be controlled, Britain could tighten its naval blockade, cut off the lifeline of German industry, avoid having to fight another land war like World War I. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, proposed Operation Wilfred, mining Norwegian waters, forcing German ships into the North Sea, creating a pretext to occupy Norway. At first, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain opposed the plan for fear of international reactions. But then, one event changed everything. Nuttish number 4, the Winter War, a strategic opportunity and a deadly trap. In November 1939, before the shockwaves from the fall of Poland had faded, a new war broke out in the far north of Europe. The Soviet Union suddenly attacked Finland, opening the Winter War, a conflict that seemed distant, yet quickly became the focus of attention for Europe's great powers. To Western public opinion, Finland was a small democratic nation standing alone against a massive power. A wave of sympathy and support for Finland spread across Britain and France. Newspapers portrayed Finnish resistance as a symbol of courage in the face of tyranny. But behind that moral facade, the British and French military leadership saw a rare strategic opportunity. They declared that they would aid Finland. However, on the operational map, this plan carried a completely different meaning. To send troops and supplies to Finland during the Nordic winter, the only feasible route was landing at the port of Narvik in northern Norway, advancing through Swedish territory, following the iron ore railway from Narvik to Luleå on the Gulf of Bothnia. And it was here that the true objective was revealed. Narvik was not merely a transit port. It was the economic lifeline of Germany. Most high-quality iron ore from the Kiruna and Gällivare mines in Swedish Lapland was shipped through this port, especially in winter when southern ports were frozen. If Britain and France seized Narvik, controlled the iron ore railway, and stationed troops at the Lapland iron mines, then in reality they would be strangling the vital raw material supply of Germany's war industry without having to open a direct front against the Wehrmacht. In other words, aid to Finland was only a political facade. The real objective was to strike at Germany's economy, its weakest point, yet also its most dangerous one. This was a plan that was both clever and extremely risky. Clever because it avoided the bloodbath scenario of World War I, where British and French armies were ground down in trench warfare. Risky because it required violating the neutrality of Norway and Sweden, operating in extremely harsh climatic conditions, and most importantly, acting before Germany could respond. What Britain and France failed to anticipate was this. Berlin was not passive. The German leadership, especially the Navy, closely monitored the diplomatic and military moves of the Allies. The plans to aid Finland could not be concealed for long. To Germany, they were clear signs of a strategic threat forming in Northern Europe. If Britain and France set foot in Narvik first, Germany could lose its iron ore supply, face a tighter naval blockade, and risk a repeat of the economic catastrophe of World War I. Thus, the Winter War, which seemed like a golden opportunity for Britain and France, inadvertently became a warning signal for Hitler and the German High Command. It not only opened a path for Allied intervention, but also pushed Germany toward a decision to strike first. From that moment on, Northern Europe was no longer a peaceful neutral region. It had become a battlefield on the verge of eruption, where only the one who struck first would gain the advantage. 5. Germany's obsession, the memory of World War I blockade. For Germany, Norway held vital importance. A gateway to the North Atlantic, an ideal base for U-boats, a transit route for Swedish iron ore, a means to break Britain's blockade. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy, was the strongest advocate of seizing Norway. On October 10, 1939, he directly warned Hitler. If Britain occupies Norway first, Germany will face a severe strategic danger. At first, Hitler hesitated, but the Winter War completely changed his outlook. On December 14, 1939, Hitler ordered secret preparations for the invasion of Norway. Number 6. Weserübung, Hitler's most daring gamble. The initial plan was called Studi Nord, later refined into Operation Weserübung. It was a plan so audacious that it involved attacking Norway and Denmark simultaneously, landing forces in 6 port cities at the same time, an unprecedented combination of naval, land, and air forces, transporting troops over more than 1,000 kilometers through waters controlled by Britain. Hitler entrusted the operation to General Nikolaus von Falkenhorst, who had experience fighting in Finland. On April 9, 1940, the operation officially began. Denmark. Victory in 6 hours. Denmark was attacked at dawn. With a small army and flat terrain, the country had little ability to sustain a long defense. After a few scattered engagements, 16 Danish soldiers were killed. King Christian X decided to surrender. After 6 hours, Denmark fell. In return, Germany allowed the government to remain, the domestic administration to continue, civilian casualties to be avoided. For Germany, this was the perfect springboard for the Norwegian campaign. Number 8. Norway, a costly victory. In Norway, the situation was entirely different. Germany attacked Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim, Stavanger, Tromsø, Narvik. At Oslo, the German cruiser Blücher was sunk by Norwegian coastal artillery, a major shock. At Narvik, the British Navy sank nearly the entire German destroyer force. But then, the German Air Force gained control of the skies. Every Allied counteroffensive was subjected to heavy bombing. Unable to maintain supply lines, Allied forces were forced to withdraw. On May 10, 1940, Germany attacked France. Norway was abandoned. After 2 months of resistance, Norway fell. The Norwegian government went into exile in Britain. 9. Shockwaves across Europe. The victory in Norway gave Germany 3,000 kilometers of strategic coastline, dominance in the North Atlantic, a secure iron ore supply line, bases for submarines and aircraft. But the price was heavy. Severe losses for the German Navy, many major warships destroyed, thousands of soldiers killed. Number 10. The fall of Chamberlain, the rise of Churchill. The failure in Norway was a fatal blow to Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. Parliament criticized him harshly for weak leadership, slow decision-making, a disastrously organized campaign. On May 10, 1940, Chamberlain resigned. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister. On that same day, Hitler launched the attack on France. The war entered its total phase. Number 11. Hitler's dangerous illusion. Victory in Norway convinced Hitler that I possess military genius superior to that of my generals. That belief became a deadly illusion. It led directly to stubbornness at Stalingrad, strategic failure in Normandy. The victory in Norway was a peak of daring, but also the seed of future catastrophe.